Welcome to The Working Songwriter, the show where today's best songwriters come to talk shop. I'm your host, Joe Pug. Each episode here, we host a distinguished guest, and we ask them to go deep on their inspiration, on their process, on the general ups and downs of making a life in music. So, whether you're a grizzled veteran furious that Billie Eilish has never heard of Van Halen, or else a scrappy upstart whose uncle is furious that you've never heard of Warrant, this is your show. Because ultimately, it is what every writer seeks most, an ironclad excuse to put off actually writing. Hey everybody, it's the last Friday of 2019, or is it? Or did I just gaslight you because the show is about a week late, because the holidays happened, and then something called the adenovirus happened to my family, and my house was basically a triage center for the last week. I don't know. Could either be the last Friday of 2019, or it could be me gaslighting you. I'll let you do your own sleuthing there. This month's show is brought to you by Bandzoogle. Built by musicians and for musicians, Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform to build a beautiful website for your music. I'm old enough to remember when you had to pay someone called a web developer to get a website made, and it would always be some guy named Trent who drove a murdered-out VW Cabriolet with a Rammstein bumper sticker and who smoked Camel Turkish Golds. And old Trent would charge you like $1,000 for a website that would be obsolete in 6 months. But it's the future now, you guys. That's not how it works anymore. We're allowed to have beautiful and nice things now. Bandzoogle powers the websites of tens of thousands of musicians around the world, from weekend warriors to Grammy winners. All the features you need for a professional website are already built in. Hosting and a custom domain name, dozens of fully customizable design templates, tools to sell your music and merch, mailing list tools, social media integrations. Plus, now they have a crowdfunding feature which lets you crowdfund for your next project commission-free. That's a good deal. The Working Songwriter podcast listeners can go to bandzoogle.com to try it for free for 30 days. Just use the promo code TWS for 15% off the first year of any subscription. That's a good deal. Thank you, Bandzoogle, for sponsoring the podcast this month and this year. Frankly, you guys have been very kind to us. If you'd like to hear some of my music live in the coming months, here's where I'll be. February 7th at Levon's Barn in Woodstock with Bonnie Light Hortzman. February 8th in New York City. The 9th in Boston. The 12th in Brooklyn. The 13th in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. The 14th in Burlington, Vermont. 15th in Northampton, Massachusetts. 16th in Buffalo. Then Rochester, Ann Arbor, Toronto, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Charleston, and then on March 7th, the 930 Club in Washington, D.C. So if you're anywhere near one of those places, or if you have people that are, send up the bat signal, let them know I'm going to be coming to town. Pick up a few tickets. We always price them reasonably, and come on out and hear a show. We'd love to see you. The last thing I have for you here in housekeeping is this. If you enjoy this podcast, if you'd like to help it remain a viable endeavor for me, here's a couple things that you can do to help. You can become a supporter of the show over at Patreon, which is a platform that allows you to directly support creative endeavors that you love. You just head to their website, Patreon. You search for my name or the name of the show, and then you sign up to kick in a few bucks every month for the show. It's like a voluntary subscription. The other thing that you could do to support to the show, if you don't feel like kicking in any cash, which I understand, is just tell a friend about it to help us grow, or write us a review in the iTunes store. The simple math on those two things is that they will help me much more than they will be a pain in the ass for you. So that's all the harassment I have for you this month. I hope you enjoy the episode. Originally from Union City, Tennessee, our guest this month, Chastity Brown, has made her home for the last few decades in the Twin Cities. She developed her voice in the folk coffee house scene there before her entrance onto the national stage with her 2012 album, Backroad Highways, which garnered loads of critical praise. Since then, she has shared the stage with the Indigo Girls, Leon Russell, and Dar Williams. She's toured extensively with Ani DeFranco as both an opening act and a member of DeFranco's band. She's appeared on Later with Jules Holland. She's recorded for the iconic folk record label Red House Records. NPR has noted that, quote, the voice that she's developed is one that we really need right now. American Songwriter has praised her, quote, dexterous musicianship, thoughtful songwriting, and careful attention to detail. She happened to be in Maryland this last month. I called her up hoping we could do an interview over FaceTime, but she just happened to be visiting Baltimore, so she came on down the BW Parkway to my place, and I was very grateful she gave me some of her time to tell her story so far. On your way back to where you're staying, there are some of the best crab cakes in the world that you can pick up. And Maryland crab cakes are a different thing.
Yes.
Have you had Maryland crab cakes before on tour?
Well, no, but I did have some at the Hotel Revival, and it was so fresh and delicious.
Well, it's also primarily made of crab, which most other crab cakes in other parts of the world aren't. It's like crab-flavored bread everywhere else, but this is like, it's huge lump meat held together by just the slightest membrane of mayonnaise and crackers, and it's very good. So I'll give you a couple places to check out on the way back.
Yeah, great.
So you really thinking about leaving Minneapolis after all these years? How long have you lived there and played music there?
I have lived in Minneapolis. I keep saying 13, but it must be 13, 14 years, because I moved there in 2005 from Knoxville, Tennessee.
Okay.
So can I add? 14 years.
What recommended Minneapolis to you at that time? That's not, when people kind of move out from where they're from, especially in the early 2000s, everyone was going to New York, LA, Chicago, Nashville, but you don't hear a lot of people picking up and moving to the Twin Cities.
I think there were a number of things that combined. One is I didn't know yet that I would be a touring musician. Loved playing around Knoxville, Johnson City, Asheville. Didn't really have a concept of like, it seemed ephemeral, like what other people do, and it's something really cool. And so, I still had a nomad's heart, and still do. And at that time, I would just take off and go places, like camp in the mountains by myself with my dog, or I had dated this lady who lived on Chincoteague Island outside of Virginia. And then a friend of mine got into the grad program at the University of Minnesota. Her father at the time was the vice president of Best Buy. So they, a little bit more affluent than anything I had known. And they were like, we'll pay to have all your stuff moved. And I was like, word. And I'd never been to Minnesota. I'd never been further north in the Midwest than Chicago. And I just...
So sight unseen, you were like, yep, take all my shit to the northernmost city.
Boom.
Possible, yeah.
Yeah, aside from I guess Duluth is in Grand Marais. And because it's still like, a southern city in Minnesota.
Right, yeah, of course.
But the other thing that was happening is there was a band in Knoxville at the time called Dixie Dirt. And along the same time, you may have heard of the band from Johnson City called the Everybody Fields.
Yeah, I have heard of them.
So at that same time in Knoxville, Dixie Dirt was becoming really popular on college radio, pseudo grunge rock with, really long, like 3-minute intros of just like ambient guitars. But it became, that was my first experience of a local band rising out of that kind of ceiling of just playing in Tennessee. And I was so obsessed with them that I started trying to write songs like them. And when I got the invite to go to Minneapolis, like that was one of my curiosities about myself, is like, what kind of, like, how am I actually into music? And I there was no way for me to know, because I was so obsessed with them. Like I had to, and it's a beautiful scene in Knoxville, but it can be quite insulated. And I can't say that I can speak for the city now, but that was my experience, is that it was like this obsession with yourself in the city. And
so you're saying you kind of took on their creative voice in your own creative voice, just because you had seen the success that they had, and it was kind of inspiring. Yeah,
super inspiring. And, just this local cult following, and they were making it on the charts, and like, when college radio like mattered for bands,
That was a different time.
That was a different time. And, so when I moved to Minneapolis, I moved to this town that was outside of the city, not knowing like the geographics or anything. And, again, it's like, maybe I could have checked out books, but I knew that there was something about what I was doing as a songwriter that like wasn't lining up, which was that like we all emulate those that we admire. And then at some point it synthesizes in us, and then we're still ourselves. Like I hadn't got to that point yet. I had no idea.
Right. So did you know, could you name that thing at the time? Could you say, I'm moving to Minneapolis because I need to find my own voice? Or was it more of an intuition that you were kind of following, and that's what ended up happening? Did you explicitly want to go there for that reason?
Well, I knew that like at that time I had Ashley Capps, who runs AC Entertainment, who is now, what we know of the owner of Bonnaroo. And that hadn't started yet, but that was on the cusp of beginning. And I didn't, part of me, I do shoot myself in the foot, because I had met him and had started networking, and was getting a little bit of attention and support playing Nashville. And I didn't know at the time, I had friends that were like getting me in front of people, and I didn't know how valuable that was. And I'm glad I left and stuff, but I did know that I was because there was something embarrassing about, for me, the way I was singing. Like I knew that I was so close to the source that there was no way of denying, like, I'm just trying to sing like them. However, they're a white indie rock band, and I am half Irish, half black. And so right then and there, by what my blood is made of, there's no way I'm going to sing like a vague indie rocker. My voice just, that's not what's in my lineage. And so it took leaving Tennessee, for one, to accept that that's where I was raised, although that's not where I was born. But then also to, just sort through and accept what I sounded like.
It's funny that you should mention that the way that felt at the time, not having your voice fully realized, it manifested itself in like a little bit of embarrassment, because I've been there before too. It is you're almost cringing as you're playing certain things in front of certain people.
Yes.
Yeah. When you're playing in front of your 10 friends at the open mic who all got your back, you feel like you could take over the world. And then as soon as someone comes inside of that little bubble and you're doing the same thing.
And calls you on your shit without even saying anything. Like no one was overtly like mean or anything. It was just like, clearly, yeah.
I've been there, man. My first record sounds exactly like, Bob Dylan, the Freewheelin', and what I was doing before that record even came out sounded even more like that. And I remember having very similar experiences at the time when certain people would come to hear me play, or when I was playing for certain strangers. There was just a certain amount of, you just kind of felt like you were shameless taking someone else's. So when you got to Minneapolis, how did that How did you begin to find that voice? How did you get away from that embarrassment?
I started playing open mics.
Where at? What clubs?
So out in the town I lived in, there was a small cafe called 318. And then I looked in the paper, and then there was an open mic happening every Tuesday.
First of all, you looked in the paper. So can we just talk about what an anachronism is?
Right? Yeah. I know, it's like kids are like, what?
Yeah. But I'm sorry. So you found
back in 1987.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Babalu. What was the name of it? Shit. These two local artists that are more in the hip hop soul scene. This rapper Desdemona, this drummer Kevin Washington, hosted this open mic that they provided the band, like a full band.
That's awesome.
Keys, drums, just incredible bassist. And you had 2 songs every Tuesday night. And if you could relay like what chords you were playing, or they were just those kind of cats that like, boom, they got it. And it's, yeah, that was like my hook of like, holy crap, here's what it feels like to play with a band. Here's like, yeah, and I think that's when it started happening. But I really think it's, in only the last 5 years have I really accepted what my voice sounds like. It's been a struggle.
So that would be 10 years after, close to 10 years after you moved to Minneapolis to find it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because in spite of all things that are hip, in the band, like, the National or things that I really freaking dig.
Yes.
I still have had to come to terms with, I often don't even sound like the music I listen to.
Yeah.
And I mean, now I feel like even there's something really exciting happening in soul music, neo soul, the experiment. Like there's I think an explosive Daniel Caesar. He's Canadian. The artist Her, the rapper No Name, even like the new Brittany Howard record, Solange. When Erykah Badu and Maxwell hit the scene in the 90s, neo soul was never a term. Now it is.
Yeah.
And now there's, at that same time, hip hop. But now we have trap. Now we have, so I feel very much a part of, there's this thing that Black people have constantly done, which they constantly reimagine music. you know, like literally create new genres. And so I feel a part of something that has like gone for me in tandem with my own personal growth and acceptance of my influences. I do love Dolly just as much as Mavis, and to accept what it means then for a child who grows up like that. I keep talking about or obsessing on the idea, like speaking of you as like your early years in songwriting and people hearing you. And that there's a proudness I feel to our lineage as folk musicians. However, that particular word right now is not... It's hard to get a teenager to understand the diversity when you say folk.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I also feel like now, for me, myself, the roots folk, I want to be like the bloom from the root now. I want my music to sound like I am my father's daughter. However, I'm doing some new shit.
Yes.
And I used to be so like, in the beginning of finding my voice, I was pretty traditional. Like no one used any pedals. No one used any synthesized sounds. It was like, that is a piano and nothing else. And now I'm like, I feel having accepted who I am, now I feel wild and curious. And that's cool. That's so fucking cool.
And if you had gone what might have been the more professionally expedient route 10 or 15 years ago by going with that local sound, maybe that would have gotten you ahead at the time. There's no way that you could participate in this moment right now the way that you are. Because it would just be a completely, you just wouldn't be prepared for it creatively. And then also it would just be a totally craven move. But the fact that you've spent 10 or 15 years slowly, piece by piece, finding your own sound, now that the train came to the station, you're ready to get on it. That's got to feel great.
And I feel that like ubiquitously, like what's happening in film and television, Black Panther, or growing up in West Tennessee, I didn't even have, my first Black teacher was my sophomore year in college. And now, and like, I can remember 5 years ago, I would be really conscious about even saying a sentence like that. And now I just feel like, you see like brown girl magic, black, like there's a consciousness of what's happening in Black art, that like I'm filling out these grants right now. And one of the questions is, how does your music stand apart? And I really don't want to. I don't want to like, and then clearly I don't want to be a pop star, like I feel really excited about being a part of all these new innovative ideas. And in the novelist world, it's called Afrofuturism. Like, what is it when people who are constantly seeing themselves humiliated and die and constantly living in fear? What does it mean when that same people generates some of the most exciting stories and music with an open heart? It's a pretty that's psychologically, I think, pretty interesting. And again, that's why I'm like, I don't need to be set apart. How lonely is that?
Right.
I mean, maybe the stories, because we can only tell the stories that we see or imagine. And in that's a singular voice. How I tell a story, how I use melody to convey the emotion. But what do you think about that question when people are like, especially having been compared to, 10, 11 years ago, that was my introduction to you as a songwriter.
Sure.
And thank God you have such a better voice than Bob Dylan. Lord knows we all love Bob Dylan, but Jesus Christ, like that can gnaw on you.
So what you're talking about right now, I've actually never been a part of it, because what you're talking about is, and you can understand my position here because you've been in my position longer than you're in the one that you're in now, but I've always just been a part of making my own art as best I can, pretty much by myself outside of a scene. What you're talking about now is doing that for a decade and change, and then having the zeitgeist of culture meet you where you're at. And that has to be, it's like you're the ninja learning karate in the mountains for 15 years. And finally, the city needs Batman to come down and save everybody. What you're talking about is honing a skill for a decade and change. And then finally, the cultural zeitgeist you seem to feel is putting its magic eye squarely on you, and you're ready for the moment. And so I know that happens to people, and that sounds amazing. And that's why I will be up in the mountains practicing my karate and sharpening my sword if it ever happens. But I've never felt it before, so I don't know. But I got to imagine that it's just got to feel like the floodgates are opening creatively for you. It's got to be so exciting.
Yeah, and like also within that, living in a city in Prince's hometown and being there when he passed, I don't know that I'll ever experience something like that in the sense of thousands. The entire state, everywhere you were, nothing, like there were conversations happening in ways that like you would never envision. And so all I could think about was Prince, Prince, Prince. And then, it slowly starts to come out how prolific. I mean, we all knew he was so prolific, but not at like such high volumes. And so now he's an ancestor. Now he's an elder. And so I was like, how, especially the past year and a half I feel like I've been more prolific than ever at trying to do that thing where it's like, just allowing myself to be wild. And wild means for me, I guess, like, I remember when I first started dating my girlfriend and I was like, I gotta feel wild. I gotta feel wild. And she's like, what does that mean? Like, do you want to like see all these other people? And for me, it just meant like, it took me a while to realize that wild to me is truly just freedom of expression and freedom of the judgment I give myself of that. Like, anyways,
well, so you're saying that you're feeling more prolific than ever. What does your creative process look like these days? I mean, do you have a place where you write all the time? Do you write on a schedule? Do you write to the project when you have a project to do? And now that you're feeling this new moment, has that changed in any way? Like, what does it look like for you these days?
So I've been living alone for the first time ever in my whole life. The last, I guess, year and a half, almost 2 years. And so because of that, I can play any time of the day. And I have been. The past year and a half, I've distanced myself from the acoustic guitars in ways that I hadn't before. I feel like each instrument evokes a different kind of story. So I've just been hanging out at the piano, which at 4 a.m. upright piano is the bee's knees,
Yeah.
I mean, I also don't have little babies, so.
No, yeah, you were describing living alone for the last year and a half, and I was just sitting here in a reverie, thinking about what that must feel like. Do you play much piano? Are you a piano player, or are you more of like a songwriter piano player?
Songwriter piano player.
That's the best kind to be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And like, I let myself play it on the record. I have been performing. I mean, this year or the past couple months is like the first time I've played piano in public.
It's scary, isn't it?
Once I start, it's such a different thing when I'm constantly playing an upright and then now I'm playing a keyboard on stage and I'm like, this don't sound.
It's kind of a bummer. Before you leave here today, I'm going to show you. I got this Help and Still piano. Have you heard of these?
No.
It's a piano built inside of a road case, and it flips out. It's a pain in the ass. It's really heavy.
Yeah.
Goes out of tune all the time. But there's something about rolling up to your club gig and playing an upright piano that as soon as you hit that in front of an audience, you're like, yeah, it was kind of worth dragging this around and having it tuned.
Okay.
It's really nice.
I look forward to seeing that.
That's neither here nor there, though. But so you've been playing it live?
So I've been playing it live, and the question was about my songwriting. I have literally allowed myself to write any idea. Not like, oh, is this Chastity Brown, the songwriter, or indie rocker, or more bluesy? Doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. And, to be honest, I watched this TED Talks with Elizabeth Gilbert.
Okay.
She did it after she had the success of Eat, Pray, Love, which is
for a second I thought you were talking about the woman that ran that company, Theranos. Did you?
I don't know what that is.
That was a company that ended up being a scam, and I was like, "Whoa, that's weird."
No,
okay,
Elizabeth
she wrote
Gilbert.
"Eat, Pray, Love." Okay,
yes,
yeah.
And so, like, I'm watching this, and my point is that this really influenced my writing in that she was saying that she didn't know what to do after that type of success because up until that point she'd always just written to write for the sake of writing, that compulsion that every artist feels. When she was approaching her second book, She had nothing, nothing, nothing. And then she realized that she wasn't doing the thing which she had always done, which is to approach the craft with diligence, devotion, and reverence. And that combination of just a mindset and then that wild liberty of trying to aspire to be as prolific as those that I admire. And for the record that I'll be releasing in the spring, I've written 86 songs.
All right.
And, 12 of them have risen to the surface of what feels like a body of work.
Oh, you're speaking my language.
And then the other ones, I'm just like, as a songwriter, the past couple years within all this, I've been learning more about co-writes. And I've always only thought in terms of an album. And then I've had a couple things in film and television. I'm like, holy shit. Here's a whole nother. So it gives me excitement in being like, I don't have to put a song in a home right away.
Sure.
Just finish the fucking song and allow yourself to know. For me, that's been harder than I thought it would be, is like to give them the respect of finishing them. That's actually proven to be way harder. So within some of those 86 songs, it might be chorus and a verse.
Yeah.
Nothing really else. But there's a solidness to it.
I don't know. I think you get 15 years in and you're allowed to not finish some songs, because if you finish a verse and a chorus or something and you're not inspired about it, it ain't going no. Just, cut your losses and move on. But 86 songs for a record, I mean, that is, you're speaking my language, because that's the way I like to do it too. Just like, let's not fuck around.
Yeah.
Like, if I write this many songs, 10 or 12 of them are going to have to be at least pretty good. You know what I mean?
And that's like one of my writing partners in Minneapolis, like that was part of the thing of like, we cannot start being like, oh yeah, this song goes with that song. And no, and even now, like who knows when folks will be listening to this, but we're in the final stages of the mixing of the record. I want to start working on an EP. Because there's like this whole group of moody songs, and there's this whole group of like, me trying to be like Pharrell and Daft Punk. And I'm like, why not? Like, again, it's like, I don't want the industry to remove my ability to enjoy this and to be.
Yeah. Well, I think we're actually living at a point where that is not only more possible than ever, but more encouraged. I mean, Spotify is going to reward you the more that you publish stuff.
Right.
Like that is to your advantage.
Yeah.
And if you want to put something out under a different nom de plume, you can do that. All it takes is setting up a $10 profile, then uploading the files. You know what I mean? And so we're actually in a great place for creating, just like you're talking about right now.
And if one of them pops into a show or cool scene in a movie,
then a business that actually has money gets to get involved.
Hey. And again, that's like, if there's young songwriters listening, that still can be like 1 in 1,000 or 1 in a million.
Sure.
But it still can just help be enthusiastic about all of the work. So yeah.
Who are some people that you've talked about your forebearers, you talk about, Prince being gone and him now being an elder. Who are some people that are still alive that have been mentors for you?
I think about this a lot, and I mean this in the most sincere way. Beyonce is, she's as an entertainer, like we just don't have that many like that in our generation that are singing and dancing
and staying relevant
and
for 20 years. That's really hard.
But again, Prince died before 60. Michael Jackson died before 60. Whitney Houston died before 60. coincidentally, global superstars, coincidentally, brown. And it's so culturally, it's not lost on me. Literally what she has given to global culture. I'm not even a religious person, but I sincerely send warm thoughts to her and her family. I literally have mindful thoughts of I hope that she has a wonderful support system. I get concerned about what that cost Whitney and Prince and Michael. And again, it was different lifestyle with when they came up of drugs and all these different things. But I literally think about her gift to our culture. And I freaking love when she she'll be singing and she'll go, listen, and then she'll do a 2.5 octave run. And yeah, I know as a songwriter, there's multiple people on those writings. And I love what she's been doing recently, which is she's been enhancing other songwriters, bringing up, I'm talking about folks who are just recently on the scene, 19 and 20-year-old songwriters that I don't know how, she discovers them, will hire them to co-write a song, So she elevates a lot of people. And furthermore, her joy. I think a lot about, at a concert, the power we have to manipulate people. Mm-hmm. And I think about the responsibility with that power. And to see an artist come out, I don't know, joy's a new thing for my life. So I'm really checking people who I'm word, okay, okay, joy. I just have always been skeptical of joy and hope. And what's interesting is all that I'm saying, I'm talking about focusing on the last 1.5 years of my life, which goes alongside of going to therapy and really.
I was about to ask what changed to not be cynical about joy and hope anymore.
When I decided to go to therapy, it was pure desperation. Mm-hmm. I was at a cusp in my life of splitting with someone of 12 years, of my earlier experiences of trauma and violence in the home, really coming out in my personality in ways that, your lover is quite accountable to all the sides of you and even the sides that you don't see.
Sure.
So even during the split, I couldn't argue with that I had a particular type of darkness that she had always witnessed. Mm-hmm. And I realized that without anyone in my close proximity, I was going to be fully responsible. And so I thrust myself at hope because I was afraid, and I thrust myself at self-care. It was just this parting mirror that ended up happening, and I'm super grateful for. In the end, it was actually a wonderful breakup. It was I love you, don't want to be with you sort of thing for both of us. Yet for me, I was oh, okay.
well, I mean, it sounds like it really forced you to confront your dark side, but, little known secret here, everyone has a dark side, mm-hmm. and what you said earlier I thought was so interesting. You said, well, I'm going to have to be responsible and accountable for this. And it's actually, no, you don't. That was a choice that you made, and a great choice, I think, because plenty of us are not accountable for our dark sides. Plenty of us, obviously myself included, have had periods of our lives where we don't account for that dark side, and there is no joy there.
Yeah.
And But you can keep on kicking the can down the road, and we've all experienced that, where you don't embody it and learn from it. And so it's great that you have.
I think specifically I have PTSD from experiencing such a long duration of violence as a child. And so that type of darkness, I think it's good to not be vague about, and that it's like what ends up happening. And if you have people with PTSD in your life, then you know it's like whether my eyes are open or closed, I can see flashes. And I just thought that until I started going to therapy, I just thought, that would be.
What do you mean see flashes?
It's almost like in the blink of me closing my eyes, I see some of those moments of harm.
Gotcha.
And, it's terrifying, because it's disorienting. And in the past, I would get trapped then in that state of fear. And what my ex had witnessed was like, then I would be silent for a couple weeks and not be able to explain, because I didn't know what that was. I was like, okay, so I have these memories, that's fucked up. And then eventually I'd feel better and would keep going. And so this type of darkness, it's like within that, I also, and that's pretty serious what I just said, but there's also a part of me that would wear that as a badge of honor, that would be like, you don't know what the fuck it is I've been through, so you can't tell me nothing. You know what I'm saying? And so,
which is true,
what a destructive pattern of, you know what I'm saying? And so it's like, that's what I mean. I was like, okay, I'm going to thrust myself into changing.
You can hear both from Chastity's lyrics and from our conversation that she has a keen eye for iniquity. I think that's a hallmark of many artists, an awareness to those iniquities that most people just accept as common and immutable. There's a beautiful poem by W.D. Earhart that takes a wry look at that artistic disposition. It's entitled The Trouble with Poets. So after I had read my poems, the man who'd promised $200 payable the night of the poetry reading gave me this soft shoe song and dance shuffle about hard times in Poetryville and a guy named Dwight who'd split for D.C. on short notice. And the short of it was, I only got $85. If you owe the bank $200 and you only pay them $85, two guys in trench coats and dark glasses come and take your car away. But I'm not the bank, and this was only a bar in South Philadelphia. I was just about to go away angry when a man at the bar called me over. Hey, listen, Mac, he said. People get messed with and shortchanged and fucked over and glad-handed and backhanded and brass-knuckled, bludgeoned, bullied, beat up and knocked down day in and day out all over the world. That's life, Mac. That's the trouble with poets. You guys refuse to accept it. You were saying for a moment there, the idea of thrusting yourself into hope. Can you expound on that just a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, as I was saying, like it became a moment of desperation. And I literally, thrusting myself into hope became an action verb, became like literally like, I have to believe that I can change. I have to believe that I don't have to literally be crippled with fear.
Mm-hmm.
And furthermore, I cannot continue to live this way. I literally was like, yeah, I mean that, and furthermore, what's happened as a result is because I'm using other avenues, being honest with friends, taking care of myself, going to therapy. Those avenues used to be completely dialed into one lane, which was songwriting.
Mm-hmm.
My songwriting was the place that I expressed quote unquote pain. Now I can express other things because I'm expressing that in other spaces.
Yes.
So what has happened music? Like, I didn't know that self-care, not the Gwyneth Paltrow version. I mean, like true, mad respect. I've always had a crush on her. Whatever. She's hot. Literally carving out a new path, carving out literally the path not traveled, which was the history of my family of not addressing anything. And so I'm like, I'm going to make all new choices. And as a result, I've actually written some fun songs, and I can honestly say they're fun.
Yeah.
You know, we played a concert a few months back in San Francisco, the Hardly Strictly Bluegrass Festival. I had an interview after with a local paper, and the interviewer said that was one of the most joyful sets I've seen in a while. And I was like, let me stop you right there. Because in 12 years of touring and performing, no one has ever said that. Because that's never been the case.
Right.
So it's like, on my previous record, Silhouette of Sirens, it really focused on, it was almost like a premonition. When I listen to it now, it's really clear that something inside my subconscious was like, you have some shit to deal with. And I don't want to sing like this anymore. Like, this is too much. I will sincerely say that those who listen to Silhouette of Sirens or have listened to it, shit, that's like, it goes dark. And yeah, so
it's interesting. You said I had to make myself believe that I could change. That would seem to imply almost against your better judgment that you, and so what you're talking about there is essentially a leap of faith or faith itself. That's how a lot of people would describe faith, even though you said earlier you're not a very religious person, but you're almost using the language of, you're using religious language there in a way.
Right. And so, which having grown up in religion, I've always had a icky feeling towards.
Oh, you grew up in the church?
I did.
Okay.
I grew up in a full gospel church in West Tennessee.
Okay.
Music was great. The practice was just so dogmatic and I think just abusive, like just
like a fundamentalist type?
Yeah, 100%.
Gotcha.
And yeah, so that terminology, I am mindful of saying that and it being like taken as me being religious, which I'm 100% not. However, I do identify with that human yearning of hoping that I'm okay and that those I love are okay. And then therefore I would want to be an active participant in seeing that through.
Mm-hmm.
You know, your family is not going to take, like, well, disregard that phrase, but yeah, I don't know. It's I'm cool with it sounding however it sounds, knowing that it's my own personal journey.
Mm-hmm. Was there a moment when, because you do seem profoundly changed, was there a moment where you knew it was going to work? Did you have?
When I became fascinated with how we learn, when my therapist was explaining to me how a child's brain develops, how we develop as into the adults that we are, and that you learn, you're learning as a child by observation. Now you're an adult and you can be mindful of the things you've learned. You can comb through the things that you've learned. Within that, also realizing the brain has the continuous capacity until it stops working, until you're no longer alive, to create new brain waves. Like the brain desires challenges. Mm-hmm. That got me fascinated in, you present new ideas, more new ideas come, And so then it was like, I don't have to, this doesn't have to be like, okay, I'm throwing myself, like, it doesn't have to be this new hardship.
Right.
It's just like, I can be curious. And that curiosity in and of itself is like the new molding of new opportunities.
Was there any hesitation on your part as you went through this? Did you have any fear or hang-ups about going to therapy or learning these tools that they would take away some of your creative ability? I mean, obviously, now that you're on the other side of it, it's done completely the opposite. Mm-hmm. But was there a worry or a fear at the time, a hesitation because of that?
Not at all. I think my songwriting has always gone so closely with my direct observation of the world. And what an amazing thing to have better sight. What an amazing thing for there just to be literally more light around me. And then, so like that's a great question, but it wasn't on my mind at all.
I've had a very different experience than you in life, but at times when I've gotten ready to be more self-reflective, or I've gone to therapy myself, I've gone to marriage counseling, I've done, personal therapy stuff with, worried about substance abuse and stuff like that. And there was always, for me, and it sounds like we're very different here, there was always this thing of like, no, I need to cling on to this little rough edge of myself because this is what's helping me create something evocative. Of course, I'm wrong every time. It isn't. It's holding me back. But
I think that was a great analogy. And when I hear you say rough edge,
yeah,
your ability to define the complexity of that rough edge only deepens your songwriting.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And it's like, I don't have to remove the rough edge.
Yeah.
All I'm trying to do is understand, well, how is the soil compacting in a way that makes this particular area a rough edge?
Yes.
And then that's just knowledge. There's no emotion in that.
And as I've gotten older, I've kind of thought to myself, it's like, don't worry, Joe. There'll always be plenty of rough edges.
Right. I mean, yeah.
This ain't getting smoothed down into a diamond anytime soon, sir.
And I'm not looking for, and that's the other thing with like caring for yourself. It's not like, it's, as an artist, like hopefully the learning is never ending, and so I'm not trying to come up with some like the ultimate aha moment. I've got it. Now I'm a guru. Like, I'm not trying to do that. I just feel like a society can function better the more it's informed, and how much better could like the ecology and society of my own mind function.
Yes.
The more I know myself, the more I'm like,
Well, and so there's a lot of, the internet's a strange thing, and there's some upsides and some downsides, but that idea of more knowledge it came to the forefront in our family recently. My sister and I were both colic babies, which basically meant babies that cried all the time for like 3 years straight. My son, when he was born, it looked like he was colic in the first 4 weeks, and it was going to be terrible. But then we found this program where you're able to shush the baby to sleep at night and put him down. And the first time I showed my mom how to do it with our son so she could help put him down, she almost got a tear in her eye. And I was like, what's the matter? And she was like, 3 years of my life were hell. And if I'd just known how this worked, it wouldn't have had to have been
right
at all. And it's just
huge.
A knowledge thing.
Yeah.
It's just through no fault of her own, there was an ignorance in this one area, and her life would have just been better, and nothing would have been taken away.
So much sleep.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
man. And there's so many different areas. I feel like our culture and our technology has really benefited us in the last, let's say, 100 years. To not saying that we don't have some problems to still work through, but that knowledge is always good, and it always helps.
And in particular, that's knowledge of the body. And,
It's just interesting to hear you say, just hearing the scientific fact that your mind could change totally made you feel differently about your ability or desire to try and make it change.
Well, because it's also like, you don't want to tell a doctor, I'm sorry, you're probably lazy, you're 18 years of research, like, the certain things, it's like, why dispute something that's like, knowledge is power.
Yeah.
We learned that.
Talk to me about your relationship with touring. You're talking about self-care here. And that would be a big, in regard to touring and being on the road, what did touring used to look like when you were younger, and what does touring look like in the last couple of years for you now in that regard?
Well, when I was younger, didn't have an agent, and it just felt like a free fall. And then slowly, in the last 5 years, I would say 5 or 6 years is when I've been touring more steadily. And then the last 2.5 years feels like I've been touring all year, each year, and getting the opportunity to, like, I was on tour with Ani DeFranco for about 14 months. And it was such a generous, I feel like the most incredible things that have happened in my career have been artist to artist. And like, I cannot think of a single thing that someone in the industry has done. But I would say that, there was a bit of self-destructiveness, and again, it was like, I'm still dealing with all this, like, private shit and issues and things going on in my mind. So, there was this joke that my guitarist started saying. He was like, "Oh, Debbie's going to be at the show tonight," which means Debbie Downer, which means then, like, the set's just going to be like, wah, wah.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I didn't have a concept of self-care. I don't know. It just felt like a free-for-all. And the Ani tour kicked my ass in so many ways. We ended up, after 3 or 4 weeks, not only opening for her, but also being in her band. And as you know what? She has 23 albums out. So her repertoire.
Just hundreds of songs.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, that in and of itself was one of the most, it is hands down the most grueling touring experience I've ever had. Because Luke and I were driving ourselves, following Ani's tour bus.
Chasing the bus.
And we got to the end of it. Coincidentally, like, we're in Barcelona. And like towards the end of this year, Sun Change tour, and Luke and I were just like, this, like, oh my God. We were just worn out. And then after a couple months of rest, that synthesized some new things in me, and like, only having your ass handed to you like that does, I think, when you're on tour. And then there's that time of rest and time of reflection and therapy that I was talking about. And so now when I'm on tour, I think about my needs. So a lot of times I'm still opening for someone as a solo act. I'm a brown woman who's had white supremacists come to their concerts. So safety is a huge thing for me. So, and not being alone, because we meet so many amazing people, but they don't know us. You know what I'm saying? It's few and far between when you make a good friend on the road at different cities.
I can count them on two hands. Yep.
So I've started bringing friends of mine that are privileged to work from home, or, they're artists.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And if they fly with me, then I'll pay for the flight.
Sure.
And the hotels and food.
Yeah.
And then, so part of touring for me is like, what do I personally need? I need to not feel alone, and someone to help with driving. That's the real talk. That's the real talk.
The truth comes out.
And then, yeah, like I love incense, in particular Palo Santo wood. I always burn that in my house, so I burn it in every hotel. I try to at least walk or run when I can.
That's it, man.
Or
the
yoga.
Exercise thing when it's possible.
Because it's like, it's an interesting practice, because you literally have to bring with you what grounds you. Like when you don't get to just go find the thing that grounds you. Like my thing is when I wake up, coffee, the book I'm reading, and a spliff, and I sit outside. That's what I do. That is how I begin every day, with like engaging with literature, getting that thing going. I'm pointing at my mind and twirling my curly hair. And you don't know if that's going to be an option on tour. So, but I try to squeeze that in anytime I can, like that little bitty portion of the routine.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah.
That's huge. You were talking about being completely spent in Barcelona. Have you ever toured for so long where you start to kind of fantasize and daydream about like, man, what if I was just an insurance agent that worked like 2 miles from my house, and I ate at the same Chinese restaurant every Thursday night, and that's how deep you can go.
Yeah, I mean, and then again, that's why I'm trying to do things differently and be more serious about grant writing and applying for grants.
So how does that work? I don't know anything about
Minnesota
that process.
actually, of all the states in the country, gives more to artists than any other state. However, it's
because they're more Canadian than any other state.
So there's different things, like there's state arts board grants that are sometimes $5,000 to $15,000. And I'm just, some of my friends that are playwrights have more knowledge about it, but there are artist grants available in Minnesota for performing artists.
Wow.
One of them that I'm applying for, the McKnight Fellowship, that's $25,000. And a rapper friend of mine got it in the last year. The year before that, it was a friend of mine that plays piano. So they do award like just touring musicians.
Wow.
And so I would love to in the coming year bring more people on the road with me, and to not stress about the 25 people or maybe 50 people or maybe 100 people that come to the show, but that I would be able to give those who play with me a respectable wage, but not have it fall on me.
Yeah.
And so so there's 3 different grants right now in Minnesota that I'm applying for, and I don't know how I was getting into that. What was the point of that?
It doesn't matter. It's all good.
I don't even know. I was like, what am I telling you this for?
Well, I think it's so fortuitous that this happened. I was calling you yesterday to see if we could do this remotely, and you were like, hey, man, I'm in Baltimore right now. And I was like, please come down the Parkway
Yes.
and hang out. So I'm so glad you did this today. Thank you for coming to me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, bud.
Yeah.
I'm thrilled that we could do this.
Me too. Right on. That's our show for this month. Thank you for listening. This month's show is brought to you by Bandzoogle, built by musicians and for musicians. Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform to build a beautiful website for your music. Use promo code TWS to get 15% off the first year of any subscription. Chastity Brown's latest album is entitled Silhouette of Sirens, available everywhere music is sold or streamed. If before we meet again, you sit down to write, please remember, an expensive drug habit is not a song, a compelling Instagram account is not a song, and most importantly, reverb is not a song. So let all that take care of itself, and for you, just keep your eye on the song.